How's everybody doing tonight? Welcome back to another episode of Difficult Conversations brought to you by Supply the Y. Tonight, we have an outstanding show. We have two men that have been in this line of work, I think, for a combination of close to 60 years between the two of them. They've trained approximately 40,000 police officers, maybe more, in use of force, defensive tactics, and firearms training. So without further ado, let me bring in Major Dwayne Fortes and retired Sergeant Steve Wohlgemuth. These gentlemen, you're in for a treat tonight. Fellas, how you doing?
What's going on, Dean? How you doing?
I'm doing very well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have you both just kind of just talk about what you've been doing and where you're at now. So really quick. So Steve, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've been doing and some of your career highlights?
So I recently retired. July 31st was my last day, and I went into the automotive industry, partnered up with a friend of mine, long-term friend. We partnered up, opened up an auto body shop in Boston, and kind of on to phase two of my life. So I'm more busy now than I ever was.
Must be nice being your own boss, though, huh?
Yeah, it is. I do answer to my partner, so I got to be careful about that.
All right. And do you have to shave every day, or can you just do your own thing now?
No, I shaved today for this. However, I go about a week or two at a wax, so it feels itchy. It's been a long time since I've let it grow.
Well, congratulations on your retirement, Steve. Dwayne, how about you?
Still grinding on my 29th year. Still teaching and educating those that want to be educated, helping those that want to be helped, and protecting those who need to be protected. That's it. Keep it moving.
All right. So they're being really modest. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these gentlemen and how we met. So in 2015, that was roughly my 11th year in police work. I started in 2004. So I'm still an infant compared to what these two gentlemen have been through. And I always had a passion for defensive tactics and use of force. And finally, I was able to get the blessing of a chief that thought enough of me to send me through the class. And that's how I met Steve and Dwayne here. They were the lead instructors for my defensive tactics certifications course. And I can tell you, they put us through the paces. It was the real deal. But if you're into that line of work and you're excited about proper application of force, and not just using the force, but the why behind the force, they did a wonderful job of supplying the why. So I thought it was only right, with everything that's going on in the country right now, to bring in two of the best that I've ever come across, and these guys are known throughout the region, throughout New England, and possibly even the country, as some of the best defensive tactics and use of force instructors around. So that's why they're here. So guys, I just want to thank you. Thank you for your imparting your expertise on myself and my, I think it was about 60 other classmates that were in that class. I know that we're all better police officers for what you were able to do for us that night, or during that week and a half.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. So now that I've got all the nice stuff out of the way, let's get down to it. Let's start with the video. I'm going to show you this, and then we're going to talk a little bit about this because, again, use of force, it's a hot button topic right now. People are talking about police reform. There's talk of defunding. But let's find out what that would actually mean from a use of force standpoint. So stand by.
Just a second.
Oh, there he is.
Put the knife down. Put the knife down. Put it down. I've got one at gunpoint central. Put the knife down.
Put it down.
Put it down.
Hey, back up.
He's not complying to command central. He's coming at us with a knife.
Knife down.
Knife down.
Knife down. Put the knife down, sir. Please. Put the knife down.
Put it down, man. Please.
Help you out, man.
We can help you. Please.
Help you.
Put it down.
Put the knife down.
Put it down. No. No. No!
No! Please don't! Do it! Please don't! Do it! No! Do it! Please don't!
Central, we need units here, 1018.
Put the knife down! Put the knife down, sir, please! Please, sir!
Put the knife down!
We can help you! Put the knife down! Please, put the knife down!
Put it down!
Don't do this! Put the knife down! Put the knife down, sir! Please! Please, put the knife down! Put the knife down, please, man! Please! Put the knife down! Put the knife down!
Put it down!
Please, no, man, no! Hey, let's leave this. Put the knife down, please! No, 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 no!
Hands behind your back!
No, no, no!
No!
No, get on the ground!
Get on the ground!
Get on the ground! Kill me! No! No! Get on the ground, man! Say something. No, no, no! Ah!
Shut!
All right. So let's talk about that a little bit. So we saw a couple different components in that video there. First thing we saw a number of verbal commands. I tried to count. I lost track of how many times they either said put the knife down or they said don't do it. It's got to be, what do you think, 40, 50 times?
Yeah, between the two of them.
But between the two of them, 40, 50 times, right? So there was that aspect of it. Then they also tried to increase the distance between themselves and the suspect. All right, so they tried to increase the distance and they tried to buy more time, calling for more units, everything that they're trained to do. Then it got to the point where now they're putting themselves in the highway. And it still didn't cause them to shoot. Like they didn't end up shooting this suspect until he charged at him and then just kind of didn't give him any choice at that point. And the thing that I really want people to take home, especially if you're not a police officer or if you're not military, is that video is proof that just because you are shot doesn't mean you stop. That gentleman was shot several times and he kept going.
7.
So that'll add a little credence to when people say, well, how come you shot so-and-so so many times? Well, watch this video. So I'm going to stop talking right now and I'm going to turn it over to, I'm going to go to you first, Dwayne. Tell us a little about this video and how this speaks to how and why we train the way we do.
That took place in Athens, Clark County Police Department, and that was back in July 1st, 2019. The gentleman, 23-year-old Aaron Hong, and as police units arrived, he met them, he confronted them, and he actually was in pursuit. And some would say, it'd be suicide by cop, but taking a page out of Steve's book, don't forget, people who are suicidal are also homicidal. And, taking into account what we're seeing on video, you have to, people that watch this in Monday Night Quarterback for training purposes, that, any upload of a video, especially off of YouTube, the videos are 99% of all videos that we view, they're corrupted and they're not in its truest form. So the takeaways from that is, they utilize time, distance, and, for layman's term, had to draw a line in the sand because of getting out into the as you said, the highway, because that's what it was, a highway.
So you mentioned the term corrupted. Can you just put a little meat on those bones for people that might not be familiar with that term? What exactly does that mean?
So videos being corrupted in a sense of like we all have our cell phones, and cell phones record, digital cell phones, these phones, why they can record so much is because, frame rates per second, 32 frame rates per second. That means within a 1 second time, there are 32 individual frames. The best way I can explain that is if I were to take a book with 32 pages and I drew stick figures in the corner, and then I fanned the paper and the stick figures would come to life. And then right in front of your face, I tear out, not saying the pages are numbered, I tear out 2 or 3 of those stick figures and I fan it again. It is impossible for the human eye to detect where the interruption was. But the stick figure will then either speed up, slow down, depending on where it was in the sense of motion. So with that being said, when you take, it's the sole proprietor. The sole proprietor, what I mean by that, it's the data in which the information was created. So think about this context. If, you know, I'm Cape Verdean, but I don't speak Creole. So if I were to go to the Cape Verde Islands right now, I couldn't fluently speak to the population who lives there. However, I know just enough to get around. Now I take my good friend Steve, who doesn't speak any Creole, and he's just going to be bobbing his head. In other words, so when we right click, Steve says, I can't open it up. I'm over here saying, hey, I can open up that media source. I know enough to get around, but I ain't going to give you its full, you know, fulfillment of that video. So my point is when we upload from another source, we lose frame rates per second. So time and distance is, as I said, corrupted. You're not seeing it as those officers seen or saw it. Now they had the Axon Flex cameras. You know, now we're talking about the line of sight that they had. As I turn, it's a fisheye lens. So now what happens in a fisheye lens is things are elongated. So what we're looking at, like, wow, that he, you know, he looked like he was 8 feet, you know, 10, 12, 15 feet, when in reality, he could have been 6 to 7 feet. And the only way that they do that is they, you know, take a known point on the ground, they mark it, measure it out, and so forth. So looking at the video in itself, the video only shows what it records. And then when you understand how video works, then you have to take that into account as well. Now we're talking, and I'll get off my soapbox. And that was broad daylight. What happens when it's at night? What about ambient? You know, what color is this hoodie in infrared?
Yeah, that's a lot of different factors, Dwayne. So, Steve, I'm going to have you jump in on this. So, what's your take on what Dwayne said, and how does that fit into to the use of force crisis, for lack of a better way to put it, that we're having in this country right now?
Yeah. So since the first time I started, you know, teaching at all, I always wanted to understand. It's funny. I always wanted to understand why police officers did what they did, and could we do something to make it better? When, you know, Dwayne went to Force Science and got certified, and he started coming back with all of this information that talked about physiological response and all that, things really started to make sense and why officers made decisions. Looking at this video in particular, you know, the officers, I'm not going to Monday morning quarterback. I wasn't there. I don't know all the facts and circumstances. I've never read the report. I've watched the video several times. So I'll just talk about the things we can see. You know, they take the terrain that they have and utilize as much of that distance to buy themselves time. Time gives them opportunity to make better decisions. Like you said, they called for backup. They tried to separate to give better. They tried to utilize good tactics and distance. They tried to communicate to the best of their ability of what they wanted the subject to do. He chose to make a decision and kind of force their hand, from what I can see, in that particular situation. You know, it's one of those things. They call for backup, but how long is that going to take? You can call a crisis negotiator. How long is that going to take? This individual, Mr. Hong, had already made his decision on what he was going to do. And to kind of echo what Dwayne had mentioned earlier, you know, not my words. Everything I say, you know, in regards to, you know, teaching or police use of force is I've kind of stolen from other great trainers or police officers or things I've read or heard. You know, someone that's suicidal is homicidal. He's willing to take a life. If he's willing to take his own life, he's willing to take someone else's with him. He made his decision. The police officers had no choice in that circumstance. There was not many more things they could have done, from what I can see.
I like that.
Yeah,
I like that a lot.
Yeah, they had to make a decision. Did you notice that the knife, after he was shot, 7 shots rung out. I don't know how many times he was hit when he went down. When he got up, did you notice the knife was on the ground? The officers did a great job transitioning to taser. Or the officer that we were looking through the body camera, or the eyeglass camera from Axon there, you can see the knife on the ground. He transitions to taser as the subject was, and ideally because they had distance and time, they were able to make good decisions. As the subject's rushing at the second officer we see in the footage, that officer's holstering because he recognizes, because he had time, which is rare in these types of situations. He has time to see the knife is on the ground. My life is in imminent danger. I got to transition to something else. In my opinion, that's what they were thinking. And, unfortunately, it escalated from there, and then the video ends. But to echo what Dwayne said, they did a lot. They did a lot of things right. Things happen. Physiologically, they're going through a lot of stress. It's hard to make decisions. They did a lot of good things to give them time to try to assess and evaluate.
So let me jump in real quick. So a couple things. First of all, I love that saying. So let me make sure I got that right, because I'm going to steal it from you and I'm going to use it. So a person that is suicidal is homicidal. Do I have it right?
Potentially homicidal, right? They're willing to take a life, right? We already know that.
Yeah, and I think that's profound. I don't think a lot of people, even cops, realize that if someone has their mind made up to take their own life, the likelihood that they'd be willing to take yours, I would say just law of averages goes through the roof, right?
Right, absolutely.
What do they have to lose at that point? They have no intention of being taken into custody because they've already decided to take their own life. So that
and you hear the term suicide by cop, right? We've all heard that. A lot of people don't know really what that means, but ultimately the subject forces the hand of the officer, in some homicidal act, meaning going at them with a weapon or simulate drawing a weapon to create a situation that the police officer has no choice but to respond. And, unfortunately, they force the officers to take their life because, one reason or another, they're unable to do it themselves,
Yeah, So that's an excellent point. That's becoming a bigger and bigger thing with the mental health, which we'll get into later in the show, about how so many more calls have a mental health component to them. That these calls are really becoming complex. It's not the bing bang thing that you see on TV, where you're watching a cop show on TV and they are finding out about a crime, they're investigating a crime, and they're solving a crime within 60-minute time frame, including commercials. It's not that way in the real world. Right. It's a little more complicated. So if you're just joining in, again, this is Supply the Why, Difficult Conversations, and I'm here with retired Sergeant Steve Wohlgemuth and Major Dwayne Fortes. They are defensive tactics icons in Massachusetts. So I'm going to hit the chat right here. So we have a question from Mike, and Mike says, a man with a knife the other day in Boston. The officer shot the man with a shotgun beanbag. The suspect was taken into custody. So the question is the shotgun beanbag a good tool to use? Is it better than a taser? And do we have these in Stoughton? All right. So again, you did that thing I like in high school. Like you say, it's one question, but it's part A through J. All right. So we're gonna take little bites of this question from Mike. So I'm gonna go to Dwayne first. So how do you feel about the beanbag shotguns?
So the beanbag shotguns, it's a tool of opportunity, giving time, distance. And with that, hopefully, the common practice is to have lethal cover along with non-lethal cover. And on an average, it takes anywhere from 2 to 3 beanbag rounds to actually be successful. So it's It's is it a good idea? Yeah, I think it's a good idea given the circumstances. But how many departments are out there that actually have that capability?
All right, Steve, is it better than a taser? Is it a better option than a taser, Steve?
All right. Well, that's a loaded question.
Yes, it is. It's difficult conversations. You're going to get loaded questions.
Yeah. Let's talk about opportunity. Right. A less lethal shotgun loaded with a beanbag round. There's limited supplies out there of people that carry them. You don't get out of your car typically with that unless what's the nature of the call? In Boston, I know nothing about that situation. I'm speculating 100% that they knew they had some indicator that this person was at a standoff position with the police. And typically, what do we see? That's when someone trained in the use of less lethal or a SWAT team member who has it on board is able to bring that to the situation, and it becomes an option. It gives more distance. It has greater range. It's nothing more than an impact tool. That's it. It's like reaching out with a long baton and hitting someone. Its design is to hit in the similar areas as a police baton.
And what are those areas, Steve? Just for people that don't know, just give an idea of what those areas might be.
With the beanbag round, it's going to primarily be the hips on down and the arms. That's it. With a baton, it would be other areas that are not going to create significant injury. Like the head, neck, spine, solar plexus, stuff like that. With a beanbag round, because it comes out with a little more velocity, those risky areas to hit someone with a beanbag round intentionally are kind of shortened, meaning more like the extremities where they would want to shoot it. And again, because you get time and distance. A taser is on a police officer's hip. Taser has its faults. You have to be within a range of 21 to 25 feet. You got to make sure these two little probes actually hit the person. They go through the clothing, and they actually make contact. Otherwise, you have a clothing disconnect, and the taser will fail. And the taser fails in police reports across the country. Taser fails approximately 50% of the time it's utilized. And it's not the device. It misses. A probe falls out. The person falls down and the probe comes out. The wind.
Does time of year play a role in that? Like, for example, like now that it's getting colder and people have more layers of clothes, is that a problem?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The probes that come out, the barb that's on the end of the probe, think of like a number 1 foot fish hook, needs to penetrate that clothing and get close, if not into the skin. It makes a small puncture in the skin, ideally. If there's any clothing, a Carhartt jacket or multiple layers, a hoodie and a shirt, or it's puffy. A lot of people wear loose clothing. The loose clothing itself inhibits the taser working. So what I mean by a loaded question is, it depends. You give me a certain circumstance, I'll tell you, hey, this is where this tool would work. And in another situation, you change it, change the facts and circumstances. I'm going to change the tool that may work in that situation.
All right, fair enough. So as we go on from there, so it seems like we got a little more about the Boston. It says that they called for a gun car and patrol officers did not have one on scene. So there you go. That speaks to your point, Steve, about this is not something, a beanbag shotgun mic is not something that's typically readily available in a patrol car. That's for a specialized circumstance. And Steve also mentioned something earlier that I want to put a little context to. So when we talk about the nature of the call, and what that means is the call for service, like what we were originally called there for. And those of us that have been on the street for quite some time, we will all tell you that a lot of times what we get called there for does not end up always being what the circumstance is when we get there. Sometimes there is, I know it's going to shock you, but sometimes the people that call the police aren't truthful with us. I know it's crazy, but sometimes people, they kind of filter and they just kind of try to guide our response by prejudicing what they tell us. All right. So that happens a lot. Sometimes you have dispatchers that filter the calls. Like they're hearing a call and they start filtering what they think is important and what isn't. So you end up missing valuable pieces, or pieces get added to what's actually happening. So you can't always go by what the original call was for. And the third thing that happens is you have people that say, well, somebody is assaultive towards me, but they have no idea what assaultive means. You get there and they're like, what do you mean they were assaultive? Well, he called me a jerk and I'd feel assaulted. Well, you know what? That's not really assaultive. Read a book. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things. So there's all different things that can attribute to the nature of the call. All right. So now I've belabored that. We got another question or a comment. I would think that if an actual shot from a gun didn't stop him, then a beanbag round would have had even less of an impact. I think that's fair to say. You know, it's one of those things. Again, like I said earlier, like just because someone gets shot doesn't mean they stop. Just like when some people see a police officer in uniform, doesn't mean they stop. So, fair point there. All right. So we've gone into that a little bit. Defunding. So I know, but you knew we had to go here eventually. So, Dwayne, talk briefly about defunding, what that means to you, and talk about the impact that would have on the training environment in policing. And then, well, after a couple minutes, we'll bounce over to Steve. Same question. Go ahead. The screen's yours, fellas.
Refer to like defunding what's taking place now. I mean, you look at, across the board that, training takes a hit, the resources. And when they say defunding, taking, money and proprieties away to go and, distribute that to where? Because that's still unclear. And obviously, the mental health industry is a big component of that. So, as far as like defunding the police, I believe more attention should be about continue to fund the police and co-work with the mental health industry. There are a lot of people right now, as we speak, that should be, getting the professional help to deal with whatever their situations are. And but they're not getting, the proper care, if you will. So where are they? They're walking amongst the general public. And next thing you know, someone calls 911, and then you have a police officer or police officers dealing with an individual who's in crisis, yet no crime has been committed, but they're there to what? Protect and serve the public. From what? From harm. And now you have a situation where you have somebody who's disconnected, and you're giving verbal commands, stop right there, get down on the ground, and they are disconnected from society. They don't respond to commands, but yet they present a threat to the officers and or the public. If the officer delays and doesn't do something, then they're going to be scrutinized for not responding quick enough. If they respond, then they're going to be scrutinized for not delaying. So it's a fine line. Fine line. So it's a classic damned if you do, damned if you don't. Steve, how do you feel about damned if you do, damned if you don't?
I think you're damned if you do. I don't think you'd be damned if you don't. Number one, I don't know what defund the police means. I don't think people say it, but they don't define it. Then people that know nothing about what police officers do on a day-to-day basis, how they train, how they work, what equipment they need to perform their jobs. They have the expectation up here, but the willingness to provide funding to get prepared for this is down here. Classic example. I'm going to put it in the perspective of my auto body shop. So I'm out in the shop, and I'm sanding a car or doing something. The guy that orders supplies comes over, and he doesn't order the supplies he wants. He comes over and says, "Hey, how is that sandpaper that I got working for you? Do you need another type? Would something make you more efficient or make you more effective?" And it's the same goes with policing. You know what? If we defund the police, I would ask one question we know happens. What is affected in policing when you start taking away money? The first thing is training. Number one, I will say this, and every police officer, a lot of police officers don't like going to training. They want to go to work. They want to do their job. And I agree, and that's great. But training makes for better police officers, better prepared police officers, brings them up to date on the latest and greatest information and tactics out there. And they don't get the time to go home and train. They need that training on the job, and to get them prepared to deal with, let's say, critical incidents or mental health issues. And the first thing to ever be impacted when funding goes is police training. We see it all the time. We do, hey, we need a full day to do training. We'll give you 4 hours. And that's been happening for years, especially in Massachusetts. And when you cut training, how can you expect a police officer to be the best at their game if you don't provide them the best equipment, the best information? And I don't know what people mean by defund the police. We can't get rid of policing as a whole. I think I hear the rumors that a few cities have tried that, limiting police response to certain calls. And there's been an outcry by the communities, hey, we need you back here. Because things just go awry, So I don't know what that means. I think you're damned if you do. I think where we need to focus is I hate saying it, but where are we going to get the money? But we need to fund more police training. If you want better police officers, you need to fund more police training. I was on the phone the other day insuring my antique motor vehicle with Haggerty Insurance. And as I'm sitting there listening to the elevator music from Haggerty Insurance, they get on and say, our appraisers go to 40 hours of in-service training every year to better appraise your antique motor vehicle. And I thought to myself, what changes year to year with antique motor vehicles that my appraiser needs to go to 40 hours of in-service training to do one thing: appraise antique cars that just got 1 year older?
40 hours.
40 hours at Haggerty Insurance to insure antique automobiles every year. I don't know.
So I got to ask this, and this is the question I ask because clearly in my capacity here, in my day job, for those of you that don't know me, I am an administrative sergeant during my day job. So I'm not out on the street like I once was. But the question that I get asked is obviously about the funding. I do something that personally I hate. I tend to answer that question with a question. All right, and I know it's annoying. And my question to those defund people is, okay, so suppose I'm on board with this defunding. You tell me what services you no longer want us to offer you. You tell me. Do you no longer want us to come to your paper exchanges on your car accidents? How about no more illegal dumping calls because somebody's dumping grass clippings at the end of your street? Can we not come to those anymore? Oh, I got a good one. Your neighbor's having a cookout, and one of their guests parked their car 6 inches into your driveway space. But you don't really like that person, and you don't really feel comfortable going to knock them on their door, and you call the cops, and now we come do it. Or you lost your iPod. Or it's stolen. You don't know which. Can we stop coming to those calls? So you tell us what calls you don't want us to respond to anymore before we can even begin to have this conversation about defunding. So,
Have you got,
gentlemen, any thoughts on that?
it's what I used to and still do, when they're talking about this defunding of police. And we all know the pivotal turning point in which brought this topic up. But I said this to a bunch of people. I challenge anybody prior to what just took place with an incident where we are today. Massachusetts. When is the last time, other than the recent riots, have you turned on the television and saw people requesting the badge and the job of officers involved in a shooting? Because officers have been involved in shooting in Massachusetts. And where I'm going with this is the training in Massachusetts pretty much has been impeccable as far as law enforcement being in the international arena, where you're hearing about incidences where, you know, people are requesting officers' jobs. When have you? I haven't. The closest thing to like international news was the Bear Summit. With the Cambridge office, and that wasn't about a shooting. That was just about profiling and whatnot. You go back to that. Snellgrove, Red Sox, right? There was no protest. We want the officer's job. It was an unfortunate set of circumstances. But prior to that, so what does that say about the training in Massachusetts? But yet we're going to defund the police and change. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Evolve it. But why are you going to extract from it? It's baffling to me.
Well, speaking of baffling, I got another clip for you. So tonight usually we do one a show, but there's so many of these that I feel the need to do a second one. So again, if you're just tuning in, this is Difficult Conversations by Supply the Why. I'm here with Steve, retired Sergeant Steve Wohlgemuth, and Major Dwayne Fortes. So, and we're just talking about some of the issues with defensive tactics, use of force, and we're just trying to educate people on the different aspects that are behind the curtain that not everybody sees. So with that said, I'm going to go into this next video just to warn you a little bit. I should have said it before the last one. These are a bit graphic. So if you have a weak constitution, you might want to look away. And secondly, if there's going to be a little bit of dead air at the beginning of this, don't worry about it. Just the way the video is, the sound will come on. So here we go.
Knife down right now. Get on the ground. Get away from that knife. Shot fired by police. Rescue
All right. Tough to watch. Definitely tough to watch. So I'll go to you first, Steve. To the people that think that we should be shooting people in an arm or a leg, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So, you know, prior to this, us chit-chatting, I happen to look up, you know, that statistic, and you see anywhere from, you know, police officers shooting in critical incidents. When police officers are involved in a shooting and have to discharge a firearm, they're hitting their target 35% or less. It depends which, you know, whether you know, look at the study in Dallas or Atlanta, you know, anywhere from 35% or less times the police officer is actually hitting their target.
And you're talking about center mass, right? You're talking about center mass too, right? Not even aiming for a limb.
Oh, I'm talking about hitting the person at all. So in that situation, in that video right there is the perfect example to kind of support what I'm saying or support the statistic. We go the range, and each police officer, it's pretty much a standard across the country that police officers must score 80% or better on the range. So 80% of their targets must go, their rounds must go in a scoring area. That's primarily standing stagnant, maybe moving a little bit here and there, not trying to save your life, running backwards, shooting with one hand, which is pretty much what occurred with that female police officer when the subject was coming at her with the knife. She shot at the subject as she was backing up and moving over rough terrain, the curbing, the grass, and she missed both those rounds. She didn't hit the female at all. You know, this goes to show that if we now say we want to hit a smaller, faster moving target, where is that percentage going to go? Where are those rounds going to go? And again, I always say this to, you know, the new police officers. They get in and they say, you know, someone says, hey, what about shoot to kill? And we always say shoot to stop. Everything from our firearm, baton, taser, less lethal impact munitions like a beanbag, pepper spray, empty hand techniques, Every technique that a police officer done has one goal, and that is to stop the attack or stop the behavior. The firearm, its only intent is to stop the violent act or the violent behavior that's going to risk someone's life being in imminent jeopardy, that or risk of serious bodily harm. That's it. The police officers don't shoot to kill. Police officers shoot to stop that immediate violent act. It's a little more powerful. It gives a little quicker response to stopping that violence. That's if they hit the person. So to ask a police officer in an extremely violent situation, while in fear for their life or the life of someone else, to try to strike in the weapon hand or the leg is an impossible task. I mean, unless you're, a recon Marine, you're probably not going to be able to accomplish that. It's impossible. And I get it. I wish it was true. I wish we could do it.
It's another thought process that's been influenced by TV, no doubt. Dwayne, no one in on this? Go ahead, Steve. I'm sorry.
I just take somebody at home right now. That when I say at home, anybody at home, roll up a piece of paper. Roll up a piece of paper. Make a little paper ball right here. Have somebody stand off to the side and just wave in hand, just like this. And then with that paper from 3 feet away, toss it and try to hit a moving hand. Same distance, I just stop moving side to side and toss the paper at my chest. As you said, center mass. The likelihood of hitting a larger target, and that's during, that ain't even a lot of stress. When you add stress to that, and that's why the percentages are what they are with the firearms. That's untrained behaviors. That's somebody or individuals that watch the Hollywood factor. There, you said TV, television. I say tell live vision. All they do is tell stories to entertain the masses. It is. It's the Hollywood factor, and you joked on it earlier. They expect it to be. Why'd you punch so many times? Why did you? Professional fighters, they're not there to end somebody's career. It's a sport. They're there for what? Endorsements. They're there to win. You see boxers, mixed martial artists, when they're throwing the punches, and we're sitting back watching this television set, and it's like, oh man, she is clearly dazed. They're out. But yet 2 or 3, 4 more punches, and the ref has to what? Intervene. They're not there in the kill moment, like I want to take this individual's life, but they are still what? Their brain is still working in the arena of that fight or flight, and they're in the fight. No different when I get that question. Why do they shoot so many times? Because in their mind, the fight was still going. And a great case that we talked about in the past is Amadou Diallo. How do you explain, 42 rounds being fired from 4 different officers and 26 rounds striking an unarmed individual, and 3 of those rounds end up in the bottom of their feet? How does that happen? Why did they shoot so many times? I got a minute?
Yeah, one thing I'd like to say is kind of bringing it all around, everything we've kind of talked about. If you look at that, the incident where Officer Metchling goes to that door on a call of a dispute about medication with her roommate or something, or a house.
And you're referring to the call we just saw, that video we just saw, yes? Okay,
right
the
now.
woman come out stabbing, just so people can follow where you're going with this.
Correct. So we're gonna separate the 2 incidents. So the first call we watched in Georgia, where the police officers went to a knife call and were approached and greeted by a subject that was clearly holding a knife. They had time and distance to set up tactics to try to mitigate the problem the best they could with the resources they had in hand. Officer Metchling shows up to a call. You talked about it. Like, calls are never what they seem. We think we're going to a car accident when in fact it's a drunk driver. We think we're going to a car accident. Next thing, it was, someone's asleep in the breakdown lane. The calls are never what they seem. And she goes there thinking she's going to help solve a dispute about medication, when the time and distance, she had none. It was taken away from her. She was not afforded any time to make a decision. Miss Baker comes out of the house wielding the knife and attacking, hitting her. She cut her with the knife, Officer Metchling, and that's when she backs up. Look how long it took her to process, hey, I'm no longer at a medication dispute call. I'm now at a knife call. Oh, wait, I was stabbed. Oh, wait, I got to get to my gun. And we watch it here in the comfort of this room, and it happens so quick. Could you imagine how Officer Metchling was feeling and how your mind cannot operate and switch gears that quick? It just physiologically, we don't have it in us. She did a great job. She backed up. She realized, oh boy, I'm in a knife fight right now. She got her gun out. She gave, stayed in the fight, gave good commands, called for backup. And then unfortunately, the situation turned out into a fatality because the woman, Miss Baker, attacks again. But my point is, both knife calls, two totally different situations. But I think a lot of times the community or the media don't depict the difference. They say, hey, another cop shoots another person,
So they lump everything together. So and that's both of you guys beautifully said. And I guess the way I try to dumb it down for people, for lack of a better way to put it, is all use of force incidents are essentially like snowflakes. There's no two that are alike. Every single use of force incident, even if it involves the same person with the same weapon at the same location, if it happens two different occasions, there is some difference somewhere, whether it's their motivation, whether it is their victim, whether it is the time of day, the weather. There's always something a little different about each one of these calls, which makes it impossible to lump them all together. There's no way you can view them all as one extension of another. So it's important that people realize that, like Steve said. Dwayne, I'm going to get to you one quick second, and then I'm going to hit the chat. But it's important that you guys understand that they're not interconnected. So go ahead, Dwayne. I can see you want to get in.
No, with that video, there's more to that video. So at the end, that was Sergeant C.J. Nobles who fired, and ultimately stopped the advancement of her attack. And she laid idle. My point being, she was shot 4 times. The first video was shot. The gentleman was shot 7 times and got back up. This lady, Ms. Baker, was shot 4 times. And when K-9 arrived on scene, they sent the dog because she was still trying to reach for the knife. So the K-9 took a bite of her arm, took hold of her arm, and she's beating on the dog while shot 4 times.
So once again, you're hammering home the point that just because someone's shot doesn't mean that's the end of the encounter. And in some cases, it might make it worse. The person realizes they're hurt. It's like, trapping a wounded animal. You get a wounded animal, that's when they're most dangerous. So that's a good point. So, gentlemen, we're already at about 50 minutes here. I know it's flown by. So we got about 10 minutes left. So we're going to hit the chat. So here's a question that I thought that both of you could sink your teeth into. So what's more important in policing today, being mentally sharp or physically sharp? Now, I know both of you guys are you're both big into working out. I know both of you are into martial arts. So you tell me, and Mike wants to know, what do you think is more important if you had to do like a 51% versus 49% type deal? Dwayne, you go first.
Yeah, I would lean more towards, you asked me 10, 15 years ago, I would have said the physical. I was full of testosterone and, ready to go. And hey, but the older you get, and then if the mental capacity, when I say the mental capacity, is to be able to, I want to use the word negotiate, if you will, to get voluntary compliance, it works. Does the physical, they go hand in hand, mental and physical being. But for the most part, where are you? When I say where are you, what is the geographical layout? What type of individuals that do you come across? 99, 98 up until this recent, we used to say, 96, 98% of the population does what the officers ask. You put the lights on, they pull over. right? But now you get people that 2% of that, they want to argue and debate, but there's a very small percentage that actually physically will confront the officer and turn it into, a attack. And when you go to make the arrest, for the better part, people are trying to do what? Get away. It's that 1 or 2% that actually wants to physically stay there and have other ulterior motives.
All right, Steve, same question. Can you give us a quick answer, 90 seconds or so, about what you think is more important, mentally sharp or physically sharp?
I think I'm not going to pick one. Thinking about it as Dwayne was talking and you were talking, I really believe I would add a third. I think you need to be emotionally sharp too. I think empathy and emotion needs to come into play with situations, especially we're talking mental illness. And let's face it, someone that's suicidal, if you have time and there's and you realize there's something going on with their mental capacity, some emotion and compassion could be important. I think you need to be physically sharp, prepared, physically, strong, tactics-wise trained. I think you need to be mentally prepared to deal with stressful situations. Also, know the knowledge of policing and what needs to go. There's a lot of things: emotion, empathy, compassion. I think all of those things are super important. I think you have to be. I think you know 100% of all of them.
All right, so I'm going to jump in on this. In a perfect world, yes, I'm with you, Steve. Being 100% of all of them, but we don't live in a perfect world. All right, especially those of us with families, kids, things like that. So if I have to choose one, again, we're talking like that game we were kids. Like, hey, if I put a gun to your head, what would you choose? I would choose mentally sharp, because if you're not mentally sharp, none of that other stuff matters. And I can show you videos again, and I promise you, in future shows, I will show you videos of cops that look like they just jumped out of a CrossFit video, but they're not mentally sharp, and they have no idea how to use all those muscles they built in doing their kipping pull-ups. None, and it puts them in a tough spot. Whereas you'll see other videos where you have guys that might not be in the best of shape, but they are mentally sharp. They have put themselves in a position. Maybe they're guys that used to train. Maybe they're guys that have had a box, wrestled, and they have been beyond. They've mentally been beyond. They've been in a situation where their will to win has come out, and now they know how to access that will to win that you can only get with a trial through fire. As Dwayne will tell you from his jiu-jitsu training. Steve, I know you train martial arts. Like, there's a point when you're training where you want to quit. But the more you train, you know how to negotiate through those times where you want to quit and your body's telling you to stop, but your mind knows that you have more left. You can only get that through training. And that's why I'm going to give the edge to being mentally sharp, because, again, you can't get there no matter how fit you are if your mind hasn't already been there first. So that's my opinion on that. So a couple more things in the chat here, guys. So Karen says, so Mike Paul says there's nothing like a D-block workout. All right. I am not sure what that means, but I'm pretty sure that's for you, Major. Karen says you got to be physically sharp to get there daily, but mentally to deal with the current climate. 100% with what's going on now.
Well said.
All right. So Bruce says, nice job, guys. Always good to see you and hear your words. Amen to that. I'm very lucky that I was able to not just talk to them on the show here. I had about 45 minutes with these gentlemen behind in the backstage, and I've been talking to Dwayne quite a bit in the last couple of days. So I'm very fortunate. All right. Here's an old friend of mine, a guy that I consider a mentor of mine, Bobby. He says, I know you know him, Steve, AKA Judo. The question adds another question. If the officer is neither mentally or physically sharp, do you take them offline and force another officer to work? All right, you guys are both bosses. Here's your tough boss question. So, Boss Wohlgemuth.
Oh, boy. Do you take them offline and force another officer to work? It's a tough balance. Well, I'm not quite sure if Judo's talking about, this person's off their game for a specific shift, if that's what we're talking about. I look at it as if as a supervisor, you should recognize that and see what you can do to bring that person back online and get them back in the game, mentally, physically. Like you said, Dean, maybe something's going on at home,
Yep.
You know what's going on. So I think you need to always pay attention as a supervisor in what's going on. Someone that has that continuous problem, that they pose a risk to themselves and risk to other officers, I think that's when, partners, other officers, supervisors need to step in and help them recognize that, number one, it's unhealthy, and number two, whether it be mental or physical, issues, it's unhealthy and it's a risk to everyone at the scene. They could make poor decisions. They could fail in a good response, which could have someone else injured. So I don't know if you take them offline. I think you recognize it, deal with it in a professional manner. If you met with resistance, then you have to put those stripes on and make a decision.
Good answer, Dwayne. Let's see if can you wrap this up in about 90 seconds? What's your take on this?
I strongly agree. They might have something personal going on, so you tap into where they are mentally, and you find out. You work from there. They need to provide the why, and then when they provide the why, then you set up the proper resources and go through the proper channels. The one thing that is not acceptable is somebody that is slacking just to be slacking, retired on duty, and have other people pick up the slack, because one, it's bad for morale, and two, you're going to end up burning out your real good officers when you just keep relying and relying and relying.
So I'm going to also give my opinion on this too. So what that happens when you do that, Judo, and it's weird for me having, almost talking to a guy that, like I said, I go to for advice, a guy that I think has helped mentor my career, but I disagree with you there. Because now you're getting into a situation where you are now punishing somebody else for being proficient at their job, which happens in this line of work too much. What happens to the people that are dependable? What do? We pile more work on those people, and we add more to their plate, and we expect them to do 3 times as much work as the person that's not pulling their weight. So if we start forcing people, and I have a family, and I have things that I want to do outside of work, and now I can't do them because someone's not pulling their weight, I don't think that's the right way to handle it either. And if somebody is mentally not up to the job, yes, that could be a day-to-day thing. But if someone's physically not up to the job, that didn't just happen overnight. I didn't go home and eat a pint of Haagen-Dazs and now all of a sudden I can't run anymore. That's not how it works. So that's something that didn't just happen, and that needed to be documented all along. And that's something that, if that's what your agency does, that's a process that, to Steve and Dwayne's point, that a lot of bosses and possibly even some coworkers need to be involved in. That's not like a one-time bang, that's it, you're off the shift type deal. Right. So, gentlemen, we are down to about 90 seconds. Really quick, Steve, what projects do you have? How can we reach you? And then Dwayne, in about 30 seconds, how can we reach you and support your projects like Viper?
I'm working still, even though I'm retired, I'm still teaching. I'm looking to help assist and fix the problems we have out there with policing. So I'm still teaching, with the Chief Academy, Plymouth here and there, still doing my thing, teaching with Dwayne. So you can reach me through Dwayne, message me through Facebook. I'm easily reachable, or come down to Coin Collision in Boston. And hopefully you're not there for a dent, but if you are, I'll take care of you there as well. So
Dwayne, that's awesome, Steve. Dwayne, what do you tell us about Viper? How do we get in touch with Viper and go from there?
Google it. Google Viper self-defense, and you're gonna see some good stuff about what I have to offer. And I just say this real quick. I'm gonna ask you to answer for everybody that's chimed in or is gonna hear this. Where do most altercations end up?
I know the
most altercations end up.
On the ground.
Tell everybody. I don't want to set it up on the ground, but how much training do officers get on the ground? I'll answer that. 0. Just think about that. So we're talking about defunding police, and it's about training. When we know that 99% of all altercations go to the ground, and then in an academy setting, in service, You ask a veteran officer, when's the last time they did in-service ground defense training? I'm not trying to turn this into, a jiu-jitsu arena, but you come to Viper Self, no strikes, period. No strikes. It's all about control. Which strikes available? Check it out.
All right. So Dwayne, I got to jump in with past time. So again, check out Viper Self-Defense, all kinds of cutting-edge training and programs. Thank you guys so much for taking time away from your family to come out, check us out. This has been one of the best episodes we've had. Ton of people engaged, and I'm so excited that you guys took the time out to talk with us here. So thank you again.
Thank you.
So,
pleasure. Please be safe.
We appreciate that. So really quick, again, this is Difficult Conversations by Supply the Wise. So if you're checking us out on Amazon, on Apple, or on Spotify, this will be out in probably a couple days after we air this. And again, if you have people that aren't on Facebook and they can't view these live, don't worry. We also have a YouTube channel, so please subscribe, like, and share these videos. We're trying to change the world one difficult conversation at a time, and we're doing it with great guests like the ones we've had tonight. So that's it. That's all I got. We'll see everybody next week for another episode of Difficult Conversations. Take care.